Bienvenue sur les ondes de Franc Masson. Mon nom est Gabe Masson et vous écoutez mon podcast dans le franc des yeux, où est-ce qu'on se parle dans le blanc des yeux avec mes invités, avec un maximum de franchise possible. Et on tire tranquillement à la fin de la première saison. Il va me rester 2 épisodes après celui-ci. Et on a 2 sur les 3 derniers épisodes qui sont focusés sur le sujet principal de cette première saison que j'avais intitulé, bien sûr, « À qui la science ?» Donc, on se posait la question, à qui appartient la science? Est-ce que nous, simples citoyens, on peut réfléchir à la science publiquement, brainstormer sur la science sans avoir l'air de complotistes déconnectés qui ne croient pas à la vérité en se questionnant, est-ce qu'on peut faire ça? C'est ce que j'explorais et surtout, bien sûr, on essayait de comprendre la pandémie au travers de la science vue par nos différents invités sur ce sujet. Donc, aujourd'hui, pour cet avant-dernier épisode de la thématique « À qui la science », on va faire un trigger warning, un avertissement sympathique à tout le monde ici en vous disant que si vous n'êtes pas une personne qui apprécie vous questionner, qui apprécie se questionner profondément, mettre en doute les narratifs principaux qui semblent être les consensus sociaux actuellement pendant la pandémie des gouvernements et de la santé publique ici au Québec, eh bien, c'est peut-être pas un épisode pour vous parce qu'ici, on va en marge là, dans cet épisode-là des théories acceptées. Alors, s'il y en a qui m'ont suivi, vous savez que j'ai eu tendance, moi, à Premièrement, j'ai essayé d'inviter tout le monde au podcast, donc autant tous les médecins, le pharmacien au Québec, les vats de bon cœur, les némites, tous les journalistes scientifiques à qui j'ai pu demander, ils ont tous refusé l'invitation, ce qui est correct, c'est un choix personnel. Mais de l'autre côté, moi, je voulais inviter aussi les voix alternatives, Réinfo COVID, Science, s'il vous plaît, M. Gendron, etc. Et ils sont venus et on a eu des belles discussions intéressantes pour comprendre un peu les différents points de vue sur la science. Maintenant, il y a un truc que j'ai glissé dans quelques conversations qui m'intéresse personnellement, c'est toute la question de la gang qui est encore à côté des 2 voies principales présentement. C'est cette gang-là qui disent qu'il n'y a pas vraiment de ce qu'on pourrait appeler le virus SARS-CoV-2. Et l'argument principal en arrière de ça, c'est qu'ils disent que scientifiquement, dans la littérature existante présentement, disponible, revue par les pairs, publiée, etc., toutes les méthodologies qui sont là n'expriment pas une vraie purification, une vraie caractérisation de la particule en tant que telle, un produit fini, une particule réelle existante dans le monde physique qui est le SARS-CoV-2. Mais en plus, ils vont plus loin que ça, cette gang-là. Ils disent que selon leurs propres études, ils commencent à être un gros groupe qui commence à mettre de la pression sur le narratif alternatif qui, lui, met de la pression sur le narratif principal. Donc, les choses bougent beaucoup présentement au travers de tout ça. Et ils disent que c'est ça, selon leur étude de la littérature historiquement parlant, si on remonte jusqu'aux années 40, 50, 60, dans tout ce qui se faisait dans les papiers scientifiques, il n'y a pas vraiment de preuve réelle scientifiquement rigoureuse qui a été faite qu'aucun des allégés virus, aucune de ces particules-là n'aurait jamais été démontrée comme étant existante, prélevée dans un être humain vivant et ensuite comme étant prouvée comme causant les maladies qu'ils sont allégés de causer depuis le début des temps modernes, de tout ce qui est cette histoire de virologie, de pandémie, etc. Alors, je répète mon avertissement, si ce n'est pas quelque chose qui vous intéresse, vous pouvez passer, OK? Vous pouvez juste pas écouter cet épisode-ci. De toute façon, on est peu de gens ici, on est quelques centaines, toutes plateformes combinées ensemble. Alors, j'espère que vous appréciez ce travail-là. Et juste avant de commencer, je vais vous dire merci encore une fois d'avoir été là pour cette première saison. Il y a une saison 2 qui est en préparation depuis déjà 3 mois. Et je suis très heureux donc de ce que je vais vous présenter dans la saison 2. Je voulais me présenter ça au mois d'avril, mais à cause du retard que j'ai pris, que je vais vous partager dans un instant, dans mon moment de franchise, bien, ce ne sera pas là. Alors, je fais une longue introduction parce que c'est mon show, puis si ça ne vous tente pas d'écouter ça, vous pouvez toujours skipper à l'avance pour l'inviter, bien sûr. Mais voilà, donc je voulais vous dire merci, bien sûr. Merci à ceux qui sont en audio aussi. Il y a quand même toujours une quarantaine à peu près de personnes qui sont là en audio. Fait que c'est cool. Merci à vous. Et puis, si jamais ça vous plaît aujourd'hui, spécialement cet épisode-là, je ne pense pas qu'il y a beaucoup de gens là, qui parlent de ça au Québec, spécialement dans nos médias alternatifs et En France, évidemment, moi, je suis plus attaché à ce qui se passe aux States et dans le milieu anglophone présentement, mais je ne sais pas à quel point il y a une voix là-dessus en France ou en Suisse et tout ça. Alors, à suivre. Mais tout ce qui prend la vapeur présentement là, au niveau du média alternatif et tout ça, on ne parle pas de ça ici. Alors moi, ça m'intéresse parce que je veux toujours essayer de suivre la méthode scientifique, c'est-à-dire d'aller au fond des hypothèses disponibles sur le marché avant de les rejeter. Donc, pour moi, l'idée, c'est d'essayer d'aller voir jusqu'où est-ce qu'on peut étudier ça de façon sérieuse et logique avant de dire ça ne fait pas de sens. Puis pour moi, il y a encore une logique dans un monde potentiel des possibles, des réalités possibles, que ce dont on va parler aujourd'hui est peut-être la vérité. Je ne sais pas, je ne dis pas que ce l'est. Hein? Donc, pensez à, c'est quoi, c'est Einstein ou je ne me souviens plus c'est lequel des philosophes qui disait là, dans certaines citations connues, hein, la marque de l'intelligence, c'est de pouvoir entretenir plusieurs idées en même temps sans admettre que l'une ou l'autre nécessairement est la bonne. Alors, c'est ce qu'on essaie de faire hein, à un petit, humble niveau ici avec cet épisode-ci. Et si vous m'avez suivi et puis que vous avez porté attention vraiment à ce que je dis dans mes épisodes, ben, vous allez comprendre totalement où est-ce que je me situe dans tout ça. Alors voilà. Juste avant de commencer, petit moment de franchise, je veux juste vous partager que je vais dire des gros mots, OK, mais tabarnak, que ça a été long à faire comme épisode, OK? J'ai passé, pour de vrai, j'ai pas compté les heures, là, mais ça m'a pris un mois, parce que j'ai pas posté depuis un mois, mais ça m'a pris un mois parce que j'ai fait la traduction, le sous-titre de l'épisode, puis je me suis rendu compte comme aux 2 tiers du temps que j'ai fait, ah ben Colin, il y a genre 40 personnes qui écoutent en audio. Si ces personnes-là sont pas bilingues, ils comprendront juste pas l'épisode. Mais là, j'étais rendu tellement loin dans ça a été tellement long, là. Je m'étais dit, ça, je vais faire ça. Fait que là, j'ai filmé 2 épisodes en anglais, puis ça m'a pris un mois pour en sous-titrer un. Le deuxième, je suis pas certain que je vais le faire. Puis ça me fait chier pour mon invité parce que c'est vraiment génial. Je vais clore la saison là-dessus. J'ai vraiment mis tellement de temps pour plusieurs raisons. Le temps a été long pour plusieurs raisons, dont entre autres la force de mon ordinateur. Tu sais, j'ai pas beaucoup de moyens, là, comme vous pouvez le voir avec mon super background, mais mon ordinateur n'est pas assez puissant pour gérer des sous-titres. Fait qu'à chaque fois que je remplissais des mots, l'ordinateur laguait pendant genre 2 minutes. Tu sais, j'exagère, là, mais c'était à peu près ça. Ce qui fait que ça me prenait 1 heure pour faire 3 minutes. Puis il a fallu que je fasse ça 2 fois et demi. Fait qu'en tout cas, bref. Voilà. Alors, étant donné que c'était tellement chiant et tout ça, avec les semaines, j'en faisais un petit peu moins parce que ça me faisait juste chier de le faire. Fait que c'est pour ça que j'ai sacré et que j'avais besoin de vider mon sac un peu avec vous. C'est mon moment de franchise. Et là, tu sais, il vient toujours un moment dans la vie où tu te dis, bon, j'ai pris la décision de le faire. Puis un moment où est-ce qu'il faut que tu dises, OK, je dois abandonner cette idée-là. Et c'est parce que c'est plus productif d'abandonner et c'était peut-être une fausse bonne idée. Mais d'un autre côté, je trouve que la discussion qui a lieu dans cet épisode-là, même si ça fait un mois, on n'est pas dans le temps, l'actualité pressante, brûlante. Là. On est vraiment dans quelque chose de plus intemporel et au contraire, pour moi, qui est fondamental à tout ce qui se passe présentement. Dans la ligne que moi je vais, ben, c'est toujours avec la méthode scientifique. Et si vous vous souvenez, si vous avez écouté des choses que je fais depuis les dernières années, physique, donc tout ce qui est entré avec la physique, pour moi, c'est le nœud central au cœur de l'oignon et tranquillement, on est en train de se diriger vers la physique. On n'a pas le choix d'aller là pour comprendre, là, selon moi, tout ce qui se passe. Et dans la saison 2, c'est là que je suis super excité parce qu'on va aller en détail là-dedans au travers de l'histoire. On va mélanger l'histoire et la physique. Dans la saison 1, on a essayé un petit peu de comprendre la réalité plus scientifique, alternative, mais il y a toujours une sous-tendance de comprendre qu'est-ce qui se passe avec la théorie des germes, la théorie du terrain, qu'est-ce que c'est? J'en ai pas parlé tant que ça, mais vous avez compris, si vous m'avez écouté, que je m'en allais vers ça. Et on arrive aujourd'hui au moment où est-ce que la base de cette idée-là est pointée par les faits dont on parle aujourd'hui avec mon invité. Alors, c'était le moment de franchise. Sans plus attendre tout le monde, je vais vous laisser vous aventurer sur ce terrain glissant, intéressant. J'espère, YouTube, que tu ne vas pas m'empêcher de poursuivre ma chaîne, même si tu as sûrement bloqué tous mes abonnés depuis 2 ans, parce que je suis bloqué à un chiffre fixe depuis 2 ans et demi. Puis il n'y a jamais personne qui est parti, puis personne qui est arrivé. Sauf il y a 2 semaines, j'ai perdu 30 abonnés, je pense, en une nuit, pour aucune raison que j'ignore. Ben, qui sait, voilà. Alors, YouTube, je ne fais pas d'affirmation. S'il te plaît, chers algorithmes, laissez-moi vivre. On fait juste étudier l'éventualité des possibilités admises sur le terrain du brainstorm scientifique dans la réalité actuelle, considérant les faits qui sont présentés par mon invité. Alors, s'il te plaît, laisse-moi vivre. Et voilà. Alors, sans plus attendre, je vais vous inviter à accueillir mon invitée et je vais la laisser se présenter elle-même au début de l'épisode ici. Alors, moi, je vais encore vous dire merci d'être là. J'espère que l'épisode va vous plaire et on se revoit à la fin pour une petite jasette relax après cet épisode-ci. Alors, tout le monde, bon show. C'est le podcast Dans le franc des yeux, épisode 15.
So what happened? Well, with me, I was working as a biostatistician, not when COVID began. I had done that in the past. I have a master's degree in biostatistics, and I worked at a hospital for 4 years. And then I quit because I had issues with that whole scenario and the whole focus of cancer research, at least at that institution. So, and then I quit and I worked as an independent consultant for several years, but I had stopped doing all that by the time COVID began. And professionally, I had done different things, but a big part of my life for the 10 years leading up to the beginning of COVID was I was very active as a safe drinking water advocate. So I was opposing the addition of fluoride to municipal water supplies. So I had quite a lot of interaction with the public health community on that topic. And I think that helped me greatly to realized that it would be a big mistake to just automatically take the public health community at their word. I was very skeptical of what was going on. I had said years before that the public health community was the biggest threat to humanity because they managed to get away with things, in my opinion, that are very harmful to humanity. But most people have been conditioned to just look at them as these saints almost and not question anything that they're doing. So that makes it even more dangerous when you don't even recognize that someone's able to, smile at you. And I'm sure a lot of them even believe that they're doing good work, while at the same time they're promoting policies and practices that are actually very harmful because they don't actually look at the science. It's more like they're conditioned they're indoctrinated themselves. And I experienced a bit of that myself because when I earned my master's degree, it was at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health at University of Toronto. Right. So what happened there was one course that everybody in the Dalai Lama School of Public Health had to take. It didn't matter what program you're in. So if you're doing biostatistics or policy or didn't matter what it was within the public health department, you had to take this one particular course. And with this course, it was the strangest thing because we didn't have any homework, no assignments, no tests, nothing. But we had to show up and they would actually take attendance, if I recall correctly. And we had to just sit there and listen to propaganda about the wonders of vaccines and water fluoridation and things like that. Like we literally had to sit there and be indoctrinated.
And what was that course? It was like a public health course or?
Yeah. So that was where I got my master's degree in biostatistics.
No, but I mean the particular class.
I forget the name of the actual class, but it was in my program was within the Dalai Lama School of Public Health, University of Toronto. So anybody taking any public health, anyone in a public health program, no matter what exactly it was, they had to sit there and listen to all this indoctrination. And I mean, my program was only a 1-year program, but imagine some of the programs must be longer and they probably get subjected, especially people in, say, policy programs, that they would be subjected to a lot of this kind of indoctrination. So
yeah, that's very interesting. So in that class, you learn the consensuses, I guess, or the supposed facts, but you don't go into the science, right? So you just learn what the messages from the scientific community that needs to get out to the public is supposed to be. That's interesting. Yes. And so that's from the public health angle, right? So because it's important to recall, like for us in Canada, I don't know if it's the same thing in the States and everywhere else in the world, but we have like the public health institutions in every province, and there's like the global public health institution of the Health Canada. And now during the pandemic, there's always the conferences of our prime ministers, like the press conferences, I guess, and our our point of our press conferences here in Quebec have been joined together with our public health. That was very weird for the whole pandemic. And now after 2 years, they're starting to say we should like have them separated. But there's something weird between at the provincial level, between the public health services or institutions and the governments. Like for us, it's here in Quebec, it's not even transparent. What is the science that the public health is doing, like behind closed doors, that they're coming out with their consensuses to give to our government, then which he uses to apply down the politics and the new laws or the new mandates or whatever. So it's an interesting dynamic. So you've lived a bit of like a closer encounter with that whole institution in your studies. And so was that something that already put like maybe like a skepticism in your mind or a doubt in your mind? Yeah, before even
completely.
You got into the cancer statistician stuff.
Yeah. I mean, even what I saw happening at the Cancer Institute that I worked at, it was troubling to me because every project I was ever assigned, they're only researching chemo, radiation, or surgery. So
Right.
never nutrition or other more natural approaches to health, which I found strange. And then, sorry, what else was I going to, I just totally lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, because I have like an endless amount of questions, so never worry about that. But so my other question of interest, just about you, just to finish maybe on your personal background. So what do you think made you think even that something was not right when you had that class and you saw that they were not going into the science or the methodology? Like what was, like, even before that, in your own mind, preparing you to see like, no, I want to know more, I need to know more, you know?
Well, I just thought this is really odd. Like in my whole life, I had never taken a class where we just had to show up and sit there and listen. So it was very unusual, you know, and I thought, what is that, you know? And I think there was a part of me that already had some doubts about the things that they were saying, but I didn't know very much at that point. Looking back, if I had known then what I know now, I mean, I would have been standing up and saying, but I didn't do it back then because I didn't know enough. But, and I know what I was going to say earlier was, in the 10 years that I was working as a safe drinking water advocate, as an activist, I saw how in the public health community, they apply blatant double standards.
Right.
They will, for example, if you show them a study showing that fluoride exposure is associated with some negative health outcome, they will always find a reason to dismiss it. Like, for example, they'll usually say, well, for one thing, they'll say it's an observational study if it's a human study.
Yeah.
Because there's no randomized controlled trials on water fluoridation to investigate either positive or negative outcomes. And so if you're showing them something, a study that's suggesting that there could be harm, they will always say, well, that's just an observational study. Correlation doesn't prove causation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is true, right?
Exactly.
But all of the studies that they rely on when they say it's safe and effective are also observational.
Yeah, for the whole vaccine thing, and for the transmission, the infection, and the corona thing as well. Like it's all epidemiology, right? It's all association or correlation. So there's the causation here, and no one talks about that.
And so it's fine for them, right, to rely on those kind of stuff. So I was always seeing examples like that where they just had this really blatant double standard. And then what I think a lot of people would be shocked to know, with water fluoridation, like I said, there's never been a randomized controlled trial to see if fluoridated water is actually effective at reducing tooth decay in all these decades. So, and so they'll say, oh, you can't, they try to make it sound stupid. They'll say, well, you can't randomize entire communities. Exactly. And that's not what we're talking about. You could do a controlled study with volunteers where they're randomly given bottled water for their drinking and cooking, and not know if it's fluoridated or not, and do an actual study to see if it helps reduce tooth decay. But in all these years, they've never done anything like that. And if people knew about the science, that was relied upon to get water fluoridation started in the first place. It's just appalling, especially by today's standards. And then there's one other simple fact that, also the chemical that they use is literally hazardous waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry. I mean, I could go on and on. Then you can just use grade school math to show that, children are told that they should only use a pea-sized bit of toothpaste and spit it out. Everyone knows the kids are not supposed to swallow their toothpaste. And it even says on the box, call poison control or get medical attention if they accidentally swallow it. But you can do simple math to see that there'd be 1/4 milligram of fluoride in that little pea-sized bit of toothpaste. And yet the exact same amount of water is in a 350 milliliter glass of optimally fluoridated water. So on the one hand, we're told spit it out. And on the other hand, we're told, oh, it's a great public health achievement. Just drink it all day long. So there's all these double standards. So so when COVID started, I was not buying into it at all.
This is so fascinating because the same type of double standard is applied in a bunch of different topics. The whole vaccine issue is the same thing, but not the COVID vaccine, but the whole historical child schedule vaccines. There's a lack of a lot of double randomized control studies, and so we could go a long way just with these type of questions, but so that prepared you mentally to get into the whole COVID thing with a skeptical eye and trying to go and find the truth. And if I'm not mistaken, so I just don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it when you saw the first YouTube presentations by Dr. Kaufman about the whole exosome thing that you said, oh, there's something there, I'm going to invest my energy there?
Pretty much, yeah. I had already come across the work of David Crow, who I don't know if you're familiar with him. David
I am,
Crow.
but not as much. It's one of the because now there's more people that are talking about that, but they're really different. So I haven't researched his stuff, but I know the name and what he's done. Yeah.
He was amazing. He actually passed away in I think it was July of 2020. But even before that, months earlier, he had produced this incredible document. It was called something like Flaws in the Coronavirus Theory. I forget the exact title right now. It's on my website. But so he had already dissected the whole story pretty much. And one of the things he pointed out was that the alleged virus had never even been isolated. So I had heard that, but I didn't know a lot. I didn't have a very good understanding of what all that meant. And then, yes, I came across I would say, thank God, someone sent me the presentations by Dr. Andrew Kaufman. And for sure, that was what really, watching both of his first two presentations on COVID, it was so eye-opening. And I think it was so helpful for lots and lots of people. So once I saw that, then I realized, in his second presentation, where he focused on Koch's postulates and how he had a section where he was explaining if there really was a virus, this is what the virologists could do to isolate it or purify it. But this is what they actually do and call isolation. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. I started looking at some of these isolation papers that have been published, and I saw what he was talking about. It takes a while to get used to looking at them if that's not your background. It's a little intimidating at first, but he did such a good job of explaining it that anybody could start looking at them and going, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. So, and then I realized, well, it seemed like what he was saying was true. But I wanted to be really careful and do my due diligence and just do everything I could to make sure. And I had used Freedom of Information requests in the past, and I can explain a little bit what that is in case anybody doesn't know. But basically, Freedom of Information is a process that's legislated. Sorry, somebody dropped something upstairs.
The police is just coming up, raiding upon you.
I hope not. So it's a process in a lot of countries where it's a legislated process that's supposed to facilitate transparency and give people access to records that are held by a government that are not already publicly available. So you could put in a request, you explain what it is that you're looking for, and then there's a protocol that they're supposed to go through to make sure that they respond properly.
Right.
So, and I had done that before with the water fluoridation, because they kept telling us water fluoridation is safe and effective for everybody. And then even when government funded studies had been published showing that normal, like just typical levels of fluoride exposure were associated with lower IQs, typical levels of exposure in pregnant women were associated with lower IQs and more ADHD symptoms in their offspring. They still kept insisting it's safe and effective for everyone, and they had no proof to back it up. And I knew that. So I did freedom of information requests, asking them, what studies do you have that actually prove that it's safe in pregnancy? And they didn't have anything. So it was an effective way to help the public cut through all the noise, because, you get into these endless arguments on social media.
Yep.
People debating over the pros and cons of various studies. So I just wanted to show in a very simple, quick, easy way that anyone could look and say, oh, look, Health Canada, or, I don't remember which institutions I did, but Public Health Ontario, the municipality where I lived, I did 9 institutions in total. They're saying, oh, they don't have any records that actually show that fluoride is safe during pregnancy. So I said, well, I could do that again with the isolation issue. Ask the government institutions, do you have any records that actually describe someone having found this alleged virus in a human and purified it out? And the reason that's so important is because if you want to know that there is a virus, you have to first find the thing that you think might be a virus and purify it, so that then you can sequence it and characterize it and do controlled experiments with it.
Right.
Because just looking at something doesn't tell you it's a virus, right? You can look at and find a little particle, but it doesn't tell you that it's the cause of a person's disease. So, and, we have all these uploaded genomes that people are aware of that help convince them that there really is a virus, because they think, well, how can there not be a virus when they have all these genomes uploaded?
Yeah.
But what has never happened is for someone to purify the particle that they think might be a virus, so that they can extract the genetic material specifically from that thing and then sequence it. Instead, they're always working with a soup of material, and they actually don't even look in the patient samples to see if they can visualize this particle that they think might be a virus. Instead, they look in a monkey, cow, human mixture, which I can explain in a moment. And they literally create the genomes out of millions and millions of sequences that they sort of detect, but not even really detect.
Right.
So that's what I was doing, to see if there was any legitimate studies that they have in their possession. And I worded all my requests very carefully to be very clear what exactly I'm looking for. So I'm looking for a record that actually describes this purification process. And I said, I'm not just interested in records where your institution did this. Any record that you have from anyone in the world, it could have been a different country, anywhere, just any study, any report published where someone is describing that they actually did this. So, and then I also always made clear that I'm not, if they have a record that meets that description and it's already publicly available, they don't have to give it to me, because that's how the legislation typically works. They only have to give you things that are not already publicly available.
Right.
So I was always careful to say, if you have a record that meets that description and it's already available, please cite it for me so that I can go and find it.
Give me the link,
give me the title,
the link or anything, or
exactly. So I made it as cover
Yeah.
all the possible bases, so that if they had any record, they would have to at least tell me about it. And I was weeding out all the, I'll call them bogus studies, where the virologists claim that they isolated a virus, but they actually did something completely different.
Right.
So we can go into that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we will. So let me just maybe take a second to summarize and see if I understand what you just said properly, and as well to mention that you're not alone in your investigation. So if I got properly what led you to it was your background in the biostatistics. You already did FOIA request, or Freedom of Information Act in French is demande d'accès à la liberté d'information here in Quebec, or I guess in France it's probably similar. So you do these requests, and as a citizen you have the right to ask your official or unofficial institutions about anything that they can transmit to us. You do the wording, and you've asked a bunch of institutions everywhere around the world with your teammates with kind of the same wording, and trying to cover as many angles as possible to make sure that any institution that you reach can provide you with the studies or the literature or anything proving that there is an isolation of the virus particles outside of a culture, a cell culture, or any other type of culture, so that we can just see the viral particle as is typically done historically in the literature with something like bacteriophages, or just bacteria themselves that can be I guess separated from everything else. Is that pretty much
Yeah. So yeah,
and
I was
you haven't received any positive answer so far?
No.
And
So
you've had other people help you with this
yeah.
job.
So I began doing that in May of 2020. And as I would receive the responses, I was putting them online and sharing them on social media, right?
Right.
So
and
eventually,
I'm sorry, just before we go further, I just want to share my screen again, and just maybe to show the response that you can get, for example, for Health Canada. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
That's from your website, right? It's a fluoridefreepeel.ca. And this is from Health Canada, as we can see on the top left corner. So this was for 2020 that you started for Health Canada. And what they're saying is, dear Christine Massey, the response to your requests made under the Access of Information Act for the following information. This is where you place your statement. And I just want to mention here that I'm not using isolation in everyday sense of the word. The acts of I am using isolation in the everyday sense of the word, separating a thing from everything else. I'm not requesting records of culturing something, or an amplification test like a PCR test, or sequencing something. I'm requesting all such records in possession, custody, download to a computer, printed in hard copy, or everything. And what they say is, we were unable to locate any records responsive to your request. So I just wanted to show that. Is there so that's pretty much like, I guess, the main answer that you get from all the institutions. Am I right?
Pretty much. Well, with Canada, I tend to get nice, simple, straightforward responses like that. So as of today, I have on my website responses from, I believe it's 47 Canadian institutions now. Canada is very well covered because I'm in Canada, so I've been focusing largely on Canada. And in the Canadian legislation, at least at the federal level and here in Ontario, the legislation says that if an institution doesn't have a record that was requested, they have to say so explicitly. So not all legislation says that in other countries. So sometimes they try to fudge it, and they'll try to give you less of a clear answer, because I think they want to leave some doubt in people's minds, so that you'll be left thinking, well, maybe they do have something, and they kind of make excuses. They'll say, anyway, but with Canada, we get very straightforward responses. Sometimes an institution tries not to give a straightforward response, but then I always go back to them and say, listen, this is what the legislation says, and you have to say so if you don't have it. So yeah, 47, or it could be 48. I think it's 47 or 48 institutions now from Canada. And because people around the world started helping, we now have on my website, last night I just uploaded, I believe it's 166 institutions now we have from roughly 30 countries. So we have lots and lots of countries covered. We have the CDC in the US, we have the European CDC.
Right.
We have at least 10 institutions that had claimed to have isolated the virus. We have at least responses from all of them, showing that they didn't. 5 of those institutions are Canadian. So a lot of people may have heard that McMaster University, Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, University of Toronto, and I'm forgetting one of them, U of T, McMaster, Sunnybrook, and Mount Sinai Hospital. These are all institutions in Ontario. They had claimed, researchers from those institutions had claimed to have jointly isolated the virus, and they published a paper on it, but they didn't isolate anything. And they did just the typical, what I call monkey business fraud that we can talk about and explain to people.
All right. So you have these, all of these institutions, you have a team of people supporting you, and you're uniforming the message for all the requests in between the people to make sure that you guys are all pretty much trying to ask the same kind of thing. And every response that you get is pretty much, we don't have records, or in different type of language that you understand that what they're saying is, we don't have such a thing, pretty much.
Yeah, basically. I have a template on my website, so if anyone wants to help, they can. I encourage people to use my wording because I did it so carefully, so that it would cover all the bases and weed out any of the bogus studies. But sometimes people have used other wording as well, but any requests that touch on the whether or not the alleged virus has been isolated, or that speak directly to the existence of the alleged virus, those are what are included in the collection.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move into the next phase of what they're potentially actually doing, and just before that, in your own investigations, interactions, because now you've reached like a circle of very interesting people, like all around the world, who are interested in that. So a bunch of different scientists and people here in Canada as well. I saw your interview with Christopher James with the whole natural law and stuff, and that guy is like quite a phenomenon as well. I really love that guy and all of the hard work he's doing. So you're in a very interesting place, like from my perspective of where you are. So again, I just want to say thank you for taking some time with me today, and just so that people know. I'm in Quebec, which is French Canada, and we have like I just want to take a minute, maybe just so that if people can understand what I've told you before we started recording, like there's kind of a movement, like an international movement of information that's happening. Of course, like things are evolving and different groups of people think different stuff, and now there's a new division kind of which is made between people. Now there's like the resistance voices in the scientific communities and medical communities is kind of organized, and people behind the whole trucker movement here in Canada feel like they have more like a foundation to be stronger, I guess, upon, and voice their voices out and express their voices out. So now there's a scientific voice that is organizing to talk against like the measures of the pandemic, the lockdowns and everything, saying that it's not really scientifically justified anymore, or was it ever? And people are doubting stuff. But the thing, and there's also the whole lawyers organized since the beginning of the pandemic with the Fullmich investigation. And here in Canada, we have Rocco Galati, which is supervising a bunch of lawyers in different provinces. And they're trying to put stuff together to sue the governments over time, and hopefully so that this situation is resolved and people can be held accountable for the actions that they did, which were not based on science potentially. But what I wanted to say that is that the whole topic of the virus isolation thing has been kind of pushed aside by all of the lawyers, and as well all of the scientists and medical professionals, I guess, that are voicing their concerns right now. So this is kind of a hot potato, and people is kind of not touching the subject. So I think it's very important, because for me, I'm drawn to that topic, because nobody seems to be able to either understand properly what's going on or debunk what you guys are saying with Kaufman, Common, and everything. Because the last thing I want to say before we go forward, Christine, is, well, we're not claiming stuff here. We're not scientists properly. So we're just trying to logically think about what's going on, about the facts that you have gathered yourself. And the main thing that we believe, I guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we believe the same thing, is that in the scientific process or the scientific method, when people make claims like the virus SARS-CoV-2 causes illness labeled as COVID-19, the claim has to be proven. But once you find holes or things that are not properly done, or bad methodologies in the literature that's supposed to prove the claim, you don't have to claim anything else. You just have to say your claim is wrong scientifically, and then we can't assume that your claim is a fact. So what you guys are saying is saying we're not bringing like a new hypothesis or a new theory necessarily. We're just saying what the community is saying, the virology is saying, that this virus causes the illness, is not factually supported by the scientific literature. So I just wanted to maybe lay that down, just make sure before we go forward. So do you agree pretty much with what I said, or do you have other comments?
Well, when the way, I'm not as cautious as you as about making claims. I don't mind. I just come right out and say it.
No problem. But
virology is not a science, clearly. This is my, me speaking now. And that they haven't even shown that this alleged virus exists, let alone that it is the cause of any disease. Because, again, nobody has ever shown, for example, that the genomes that they create, that they
you can use the transition to get into like what they're claiming they're doing, and the whole process, if you want to explain like the actual studies and everything, right?
Okay, yeah. So so they're what they're doing in these studies is, when they say that they isolated a virus, what they've actually done is, again, they don't even look in the patient sample. They take fluid from a patient, and the logical thing, if you really believe that there's a virus that has been making people sick, it's caused infection to the point that it's made people ill, and we're all potentially spewing it every time we exhale.
Right.
You should be able to find it in that sample.
That's the whole
patient, right?
The viral load thing, right? So once the virus is inside of you and infects your cells, and it multiplies, and then you have millions of viruses. So it's aerosolized, or it gets into the small particles and the dust particles, and so it spreads like that as a germ. So logically, as you said, we should be able to like take the masks or something of people that are supposedly infected and find the particle in the viral.
Yeah, but they don't even try to do that in virology. So instead, what they do, see, if you wanted to do it in a logical way, you would look in the patient sample and purify out the particles that you think might be a virus. So you would need to, do ultracentrifugation, whatever, various techniques to try to filter out all the other things. So you have a sample where you just have that one thing left over. Because again, that way you could extract the genetic material just from that specific thing. It's the genetic material is coming from that, and not from a bunch of other things. And you could sequence it, and you could characterize it, analyze this particle in various ways so that it's fully characterized. And you could do controlled experiments, and they do animal experiments in virology, but they never do them in a logical or scientific way. So all that, the first step would be to purify And then you can do work with that purified thing. So you know that you're analyzing that specific thing and you're drawing conclusions about that specific thing. But instead, what they do in virology, they insist that if they were to look in the patient sample, there would be too little of the virus and they wouldn't be able to find it. So they don't even try. Right, so they say, well, instead we have to give it a chance to grow in some monkey kidney cells.
Right.
Which is really strange because supposedly the host is the human and it already grew in the human. It already replicated, like you said, and there should be millions and millions of copies of this thing. But instead they say, no, we have to put it in a non-host cell line, monkey kidney cells, which are called viro cells, and give it a chance to grow. So they put the patient sample with this cell line and they add fetal bovine serum. So now you've got material taken from the human, monkeys, and a cow.
Yeah, and the material from the human is not just virus, of course. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of genetic material, cell debris, RNA, DNA bases, whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And they haven't even
and stuff like that. Yeah.
And they haven't even looked in the sample to see if there is a little thing that they think might be a virus. Anyway, so they've got this mixture of human, monkey, and cow material. And they also add drugs that are toxic to kidneys. And they say, well, it's because they don't want bacteria and fungi to grow in this mixture. So they add these toxic chemicals. And then the fetal bovine serum is added as a source of nutrition for the monkey cells. But at some point, they lower the level of the nutrition so that the monkey cells are in a malnourished state. So they're basically starving and poisoning the monkey kidney cells. And they watch this mixture for several days. And usually after 4 or 5 days, they'll say, and then we saw they call it cytopathic effects, which means the cells started breaking down. The cells were being harmed. And they attribute this to a virus, and not just any virus, but a specific virus, even though they didn't look for a particle that they think might be a virus. They didn't purify anything. They're not doing a proper experiment. You have an independent variable that you manipulate. So, you should have a control group, and ideally everything would be the exact same in both groups. So whether you're using a cell line or you're using animals for your experiment to show that this thing causes harm, you'd want everything to be the same in both groups, except that one group gets exposed to the thing that you think might be a virus. That would be the logical, scientific, if you really want to do things in a careful, controlled way. But they don't do this. They don't even show that there is this independent variable.
So what you guys are saying, is that they're pretty much in all the studies that you've reviewed and the other doctors like Kaufman and Cowan have reviewed. So there's never the control experiments where they would pretend, I guess, to have everything the same in the culture, like the cell culture, but with samples of DNA of people who are not supposedly hosting the virus, right? So if they would do that, then they would have like supposedly a different experiment, which would be controlled, which would be a healthy experiment, but they never do that. Is that pretty much what you guys are?
Yeah, well, I would argue, ideally, what I would do is take the same patient sample from a healthy person, for someone who's not suspected of having the alleged virus.
Exactly.
And split it in two so that you have the exact same substance given to both groups of monkey cells or both groups of animals. That way you know it's the same thing. And then you have a purified sample from someone, who was sick that you think had a virus, a purified sample of that thing, and it goes to the experimental group. So everything, it would be the same.
So
that would be the ideal.
The sample you're saying would be like the purified sample of just the virus, you're saying?
Yes. Right. So everything else would be the exact same.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be, that would be the ideal way to do things.
That would be the ideal way. So the whole point revolves around the idea that nowhere seems to be found that sample, which is the isolated variable of the thing that you could use as an adjunct or as a control or as an independent variable.
Right.
Okay.
So instead, they just make this human monkey cow mixture with the toxic drugs, and they observe effects, and they assume that they know what caused the effects. But the effect is an effect. It's not the cause. You don't know what the cause was because you didn't do a controlled experiment. You don't even know. You don't know what the cause is. They just make assumptions.
Right, which makes the link with the whole approach and work of Stefan Lanka in the last year or so. So are you familiar with what he did in his, I guess now 3 control experiments? So what he did is he decided, I guess, to see what was the source of these cytopathic effects in the cell cultures. And he kind of performed some type of control experiments which showed even cytopathic effects without supposedly some viruses. Are you comfortable to talk a bit about that and see what you got from his experiments, or not really?
A little bit. I mean, yeah, that's basically my understanding of it, was that he used the same type of cell line, and he used the same type of drugs, but he didn't add anything from a patient that was suspected of having a virus. So instead, he had a few different groups, and I'm a little fuzzy on the details right now.
Yeah.
But in each case, there was nothing added from a sick patient that was suspected of having a virus. And yet he was still able to get the same cytopathic effects, even by, for example, adding yeast. In one of the groups, he added yeast instead. Yeah. So he showed that you can get those cytopathic effects without any alleged virus. So that shows, it just, to me, I mean, I don't even need to see something like that, because I just say, well, look at what the virologists did do. It wasn't logical. They didn't show anything to do with the virus. But what he's doing is, I guess, to help convince people that are more skeptical and having a harder time opening their minds. He's showing them, look, you can get these exact same cytopathic effects without any alleged virus.
We need that. We need like all the literature that we can have, because if we're to understand what's going on properly, it needs to be recorded in the literature and to be open source. So that's the proper scientific method. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you, I mean, we understand that as people who are open-minded to it, I guess, as you said, but for the prosperity, not the prosperity, but for the time, like we need to build a new foundation. So we need all the studies that we can have, right? So that's awesome. And so and that makes the link, what he did, Stefan Lanka, with the historical perspective of the scientific literature as well, because as you guys, I feel like there's a team. There's not a team, but I mean,
there is
the group, I guess, or people. What you're saying, especially to the work of that's more Kaufman and Bailey and Cowan, is like the and Lanka as well. Anyway, so the whole literature, like back to the 50s, the 1950s, like the first papers of virology, like with John Enders. He, even in his own paper, in the conclusion and the analysis of the experiment, he said that the control didn't show that that there was actually no conclusion officially that the virus was the causative agent of the cytopathic effects, because in his own, I guess, control, there was also cytopathic effects. But what he said, that just a proper scientific conclusion, like in what is it, in 52 or 54, that the future literature should confirm or infirm that there was like a difference in the control or not. But it was never kind of done afterwards, right? So it's kind of afterwards, people just assumed that the experiment did not need a control anymore, and they just assumed the cytopathic effects were the effect of the virus particles, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty
and maybe if I could just back up a little bit too. So I just want to make clear that, so the problem isn't just that they didn't prove causation by this supposed virus, but they didn't even show that the virus, that particle exists, because, you know, they tell us very specific things about the alleged virus. So they say it has an RNA genome of 30,000 base pairs, and it's surrounded by a spiky protein shell. And they say they've analyzed this protein, you know, extensively and what have you, but nobody has ever shown that that thing exists. when you look at, for example, the genomes, again, when they go to make a genome, they take all of the RNA either from a patient sample, or they take it from that monkey cow human mixture. They take all the RNA, and then they detect millions of sequences. And Dr. Lanka has pointed out that in doing that step of detecting sequences in the mixture, it's not even reliable. You don't even know that they actually detected those sequences because they run PCR tests with lots and lots of cycles.
Yeah.
And we know that PCR, like basically everybody understands by now, and even Anthony Fauci admits that when you run too many cycles on a PCR, the results are unreliable.
Yeah.
So they didn't even detect these millions of sequences in a way that's at all reliable. So you have sequences that might have been in that mixture and some that they just, kind of made up, pretended, claimed to have detected, but didn't really. And there's millions and millions of them. And, these sequences aren't going to come with a little flag to tell you, hey, I'm from a virus, I'm from the human, I'm from the monkey, I'm from a bacteria. You just have RNA.
They're just
sequences. Yeah, no, anybody, to me, that's all you really need to know about these genomes. You don't even need to go any further, because all you can do is make assumptions that, number one, that there even is a particle with a 30,000 base pair genome. You don't even know that there is one. And number two, how do you take all these millions of sequences and they decide which ones to use and which ones not to use, and they overlap them and trim and edit and align and map, and they literally just make up a genome on their computer. So the genome
which is made that process of alignment, which is made through some computer programs. There's, I guess, from what I understand now, there's two major different types of programs, which they put through all the sequences that you said that are found through the sample, which are coming from who knows, because there's a lot of different stuff in the sample. The programs align themselves, but how do the programs work to align themselves? It's kind of a black box as well. No one really knows who built the program, because you need to code the program to understand how they align all the pieces together. And as you said, there's like overlaps, and then they're using like a data bank memory of past viral sequences to kind of align the sequences based on previous viral sequences, which are alleged to be, I guess, viral sequences. So they're kind of a vicious circle there, or something.
Exactly. I believe with the first genome that they made up in China, they did what they called de novo sequencing, where they didn't try to match it to a template to a previous genome. But they still just made one up. That's all you can do when you have millions and millions of sequences. All you can do is guess and make assumptions and create something, right? So that's what they did. Excuse me. And then, so it's completely meaningless. It hasn't been shown to correspond to anything in the physical realm. And then they compared it to, I believe, a bat coronavirus, the genome for a bat coronavirus that was also never shown to exist, and whose genome was also made up in a similar fashion. So they're comparing things that are completely meaningless, that have never been shown to correspond to anything in the physical realm. And they say, oh, it's, I think it's something like 80% similar. Well, so what? You just made them up. It doesn't matter.
First of all, right? Exactly.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. And then after they have that first genome, then they tend to, if future genomes, they use that as a template, and they try to get their computer to make another genome that matches that one, right? But so it's all completely meaningless and made up, like literally. And I don't mean to sound rude or disrespectful, but I mean, there's no getting around it. Like, it's made up. It's literally just made up.
It does sound rude, and it sounds completely impossible, right? Out of this world, because, and then that's where I get my layman cap on. Like, I'm just like, as a regular citizen of just a normal person, who you're like, it's impossible that a whole scientific community and confirmed by all the other scientific departments of different disciplines, could not do something like concrete with the whole thing, because the whole process, because as you said, now your own conclusion earlier that you said I'm not as prudent as you are, but you said like, for me, virology is not a science anymore. So is it like pretty much where you are at this day? You're like, you don't see any more foundational truth, I guess, even to the whole virology process as a science?
No, I don't see any basis to it at all. And I should mention too that we have a growing collection of freedom of information responses on a lot of other alleged viruses as well.
Right.
So because, Dr. Kaufman and Cowan and Lanka, and there were others before that, like, for example, with the alleged HIV AIDS virus.
Yeah.
There was a group decades ago called the Perth Group, and I've not looked into their work so much, but I mean, I always hear about them. And because my interest in all this began with COVID, and once I got started with the freedom of information, I just stuck with that because I felt that was an important piece of evidence. You did,
because we need like some of these specific angles to be investigated as much as possible to gather like as many data, factual, strong data that
So, but anyway, Doctors Kaufman and Cowan and others were saying that these other alleged viruses had not been shown to exist either. So we have done a series of freedom of information requests on other alleged viruses, not to the same extent as with this SARS-CoV-2, which is the name of the imaginary COVID-19 virus.
Yeah.
I just call it imaginary because to me it's clearly imaginary.
I like
it. Made up. And so I have focused mainly on the CDC because CDC is so influential and trusted by people around the world. So we have responses from many, from the CDC on many alleged viruses, basically all the famous ones that you could think of, like measles, smallpox, HIV, HPV, any alleged virus on their so-called vaccination schedules. They have no record of any of these having been isolated or purified from humans. So, and then I also have one from the Public Health Agency of Canada. It was a lot of work to do all these requests. So I said, well, you know what, I'll just ask them if they have any record of any alleged virus having been purified from a human. And they said, no, they don't have any. And we also have many responses from example, from the CDC, from Public Health Agency of Canada, from institutions in at least one in New Zealand, and from one of the Ontario institutions that had claimed to have isolated the virus, where they tell us that what we're asking for is never done in virology. They say things like it's outside the scope of what is possible in virology. And then they, sometimes they talk about the cell culture. This is how things are done. A virus is isolated by doing the cell culture and then confirmed with a PCR test.
Yeah, because the whole testing issue is a whole problematic in itself that we've touched upon it, but we can expand like 4 hours as well on it. And I guess like I'm sure you've watched these, but I would like to direct people, if they haven't, to I'm gonna link like a full like I guess 2 hours interview with Kerry Mullis, which was the inventor of the PCR methodology, and he was interviewed, and he spoke about the whole AIDS stuff. And there's the documentary as well, House of Numbers. Did you watch that one?
I don't think so. No.
House of Numbers. It's like the best documentary about the whole AIDS situation. It was done, I guess, in the early 2000s. So it's like it's a whole older grain of a visual, but the information is amazing, and it shows all the confusion with the tests, like people at that time, like there's the 2 tests, right? The 2 different kind of tests for the HIV, but like the guy who did the documentary is amazing. Like he's going in all different countries, talking to people and showing like if someone like they were living close, I guess, to the Canadian-US border. If they're on one side of the border, they're considered to be HIV negative, but with the test on the other side of the border, they're considered to be HIV positive, and all of that. So the documentary House of Numbers, it's hard to find, but it's amazing. It's really good. So okay, so this is pretty much where we are, and we're now on the February 10th. To 2022, and 2 days ago, or was it 2 days ago, I guess now, there was a very for me, and I'd like to hear your feedback on that, Christine, a very important moment in relationship to what I was talking about the new division of the science and the lawyers and everything, because now Stefan Lanka and Dr. Andrew Kaufman were invited to the what is it, the Corona committee of Reiner Fullmich, investigative committee of Reiner Fullmich. And they give a presentation with Wodark, right? Wolfgang Wodark?
Yes, right, correct.
Which this guy is very important in the whole thing, because he was like a whistleblower early on in the process about the whole syncytin, or the similarities between the spike proteins and the fertility stuff. Like he was like a whistleblower upon that. He was like he was on the good side, like of the resistance movement against the whole thing. But during the presentation of Kaufman and Lanka, it did not go as it was not a fluid conversation. So did you get like just an impression upon what happened there, or do you want to talk about it, or are you not comfortable to talk about that?
No, I'll talk about it. First of all, I'll just mention that I added Reiner Fullmich to my I have an email list where I send out updates to people about the Freedom of Information responses. So as I get new ones, and
there's a whole history of you as well with Peter McCullough, which is fascinating. But let's not focus on that right now.
That's right.
It's awesome. Okay.
So so I had Reiner Fullmich on my email list for quite a while, and like you mentioned, even in 2020, he acknowledged that the alleged virus hadn't been isolated. So we know he was aware of this issue. Just how in depth his understanding was, I don't know, but I mean, he was certainly aware of it. And also several months ago now, there was an email list for a group called Doctors for COVID Ethics. And there was a lot of famous people on this list, people like Reiner. It wasn't just doctors, but people like Reiner Fullmich and some of the most famous people in this whole freedom movement, or whatever you want to call it, the COVID skeptics. People speaking out against the injections and whatnot, warning people. And someone added me to that email list. And so I had a few opportunities to challenge people on that list. And I did so, and every time they just failed completely to back up their claims of a virus. And Reiner was copied on those. I don't know if he read them or not, but he was certainly aware of this issue. And just the fact that it took, almost 2 years to have someone like Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Lanka, I personally find that very, very strange, because, if you can understand that there wasn't even a virus, you would think that a group that says they want to get to the bottom, when they want to get to the truth in all of this, you would think they would want to know that, because if you can show that there was never any proof of a virus, then obviously everything else that followed from that was fraud. It was just not based on any science whatsoever, and you don't have to waste vast amounts of time and energy arguing over statistics and how, I mean, you could spend the rest of your life arguing with people over COVID. It's much faster and easier to just show, look, they never even showed that there was a virus, so obviously everything else is based on a fraud. Anyway, but yes, they did finally have Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Lanka on as to interview them. And I mean, Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Lanka did their presentations, and then from what I recall, it seemed that Reiner and Wolfgang and the lady, I forget her name, they showed no interest whatsoever in discussing the evidence. Dr. Kaufman had laid out the facts so beautifully, all the basics of what's being done in virology, showed the problems with it. Dr. Lanka followed through with a lot more insight. And
let me just take a second here, because Lanka had problems with his web connection. So Kaufman made his whole presentation, and then the first thing that jumped to me was when Godard, Wolfgang, was his last name? Sorry, Woodard.
Yes, Woodard. Yeah.
Woodard. What he said after the first segment of Kaufman, he said the opposite of what I kind of took the time to explain earlier. He said, if you get with this line of evidence showing that there's no viral infection, because it got into the whole infection debate, Wolfgang said that you need to have another hypothesis. You need to provide another mechanism of infection, because the only thing we have right now is viruses. And I was like, why would you say something like that? That's not scientific.
Exactly.
You don't need to come up with the proper new mechanism. You just need to say, this is wrong. Let's just take a break. And this is wrong. Let's reevaluate and together come up with the new mechanism or hypothesis, right? So that would be how I would think logically about that.
Yes. And I would love to speak with Wolfgang and say to him, listen, let's imagine you were accused of mass murder. You had killed thousands or millions of people. You're being accused of this. And you're easily able to show that the evidence against you is ridiculous. There's no case against you, and everybody can see it. But the police say, yeah, but you know what? You're going to have to tell us who did kill all those people, or we're not going to let you go. It's that kind of logic. It doesn't make any sense. The fact that I don't know who killed those people, I wasn't there.
That's an amazing comparison. It reverses the whole thing. I mean, I don't need to show who killed it. I mean, do you want to be free or do you want to be guilty?
Exactly. So, and I mean,
and if I can, this makes the example you just said, which I think is a great example, and I'd like to hear his response to this. But it makes the parallel with the whole natural law stuff, because this is innocent until proven guilty. This is science as well, for how I see it. I see it through the physics, right? So the natural law is scientific applied to, in a sense, being proven guilty. You don't need to know the answer before you can prove innocence, right? So it's the same thing in science. You can debunk something, but you don't need the other answer to debunk something.
Exactly. Like you said, one step at a time. And, Reiner has been very clear in saying that the tests are useless. These PCR tests are completely useless and meaningless. He admits that. So how is there even a need to explain anything really? Because when you know that the tests were useless, you don't have all these cases that need explaining anyway. We all know that a lot of people who've done their homework at this point realize that they just put a false label onto people. They reclassified other diseases. They distract everyone from whatever really caused the person's death or their illness. And to me, that's very obvious. It's not like some mystery that people have died or gotten sick from many different causes. It's not as though there's even one specific thing behind all these so-called cases. They're just literally fraudulent labels that were slapped onto people. So
that's pretty intense. And the other thing that, as you just said, the other thing that jumped to me, during the whole 90 minutes almost of their presentation and their interaction, all the five of them together, is at the end, right? So as you said, Fullmich was he was kind of playing, well, not playing, but I mean, guess of guy taking still a good role, a positive role, right? Together, the final things we're going to pursue that way. We think in the courts, we have the best chance with the whole testing, and we show that the whole test is fraudulent. So the whole pandemic was planned and everything. And good luck to you. Good luck, Dr. Lanka. Good luck, Dr. Kaufman. You can pursue your whole virus isolation thing. So for me, that was the other thing that was interesting, because as Dr. Kaufman said, and I agree, and as everyone kind of agreed at the end, we need the maximum angles, and if you guys can do your stuff and our stuff, it's great. But on the other thing is like Fullmich has all the power and the money. Like the lawyers, they all have the money and they all have the attention of everyone. Like, so they have so much more mass of consciousness like around them than the whole virus isolation thing. So it's kind of it kind of left me with an interesting feeling in my taste in my mouth, if I can say. I'm like, well, okay, it's positive, but at the same time, you're gathering everything around you, and it makes the link with us here in Canada, right? As I told to you, like Stéphane Blais here in Quebec, which is in contact with Rocco Galati, with our foundation, which all get together at the Canadian level. It's like they all had the same word to say, okay, let's drop the whole isolation thing. Let's not talk about it. We're not going to focus on this. And like from like a year and a half back, and still today, it's like Fullmich just put the whole cap on the thing. So exactly. That's another way to see it. It's like, let's see it positive, but at the same time, the effect of that is like, the virus isolation thing, it's in this little flask and we're going to put it to the side, and then no one can talk about that. So that's kind of, if I have to assume intentions, to which I don't like to do, but that's kind of another way to see it, right?
Well, one of the things that concerns me a lot is when so many people around the world are watching this Corona Investigative Committee that has been saying we're going to get to the bottom of all of this. If they don't expose this whole virus isolation issue, that's going to leave a lot of people assuming that there was a virus. And how, like Reiner, what I have seen Reiner say within the last month or so is things like, yes, there is a virus. We know there is a virus, but it's basically just a seasonal flu. We know its mortality rate, but the tests are completely meaningless. And to me, that's not even a coherent argument, because if you're admitting the tests are useless, how do you know the mortality rate? How do you calculate a mortality rate? And how do you, like, we know there's no validated tests because you need an actual virus as the gold standard to figure out how well those tests perform. So nobody can make any logical, valid comments about false positive rate, the accuracy of the tests, because you have to have the gold standard, so that with every person you say, okay, what is the truth? The gold standard, did they have the virus infection or not? And we know nobody does, because no one has even shown the virus exists. And then you compare that to the test result, and that's how you calculate accuracy. You don't have a gold standard. You don't even have anything to talk about. There's no accuracy to calculate. Yeah. So to me, Reiner's argument is completely incoherent. He's not making any sense. He's, on the one hand, and the other thing he said was, there is a virus, but it hasn't been isolated. It's only been isolated on a computer, which doesn't make any sense, because you don't isolate things on a computer. So to me, he's incoherent at this point, and he's prepared, after leading all these people to believe that they're going to get to the bottom of everything, and now he's going to just leave them with the belief that yes, there is a virus. It's just not that bad.
Exactly. And the deeper or more important, I guess, for me, implication about that angle of thinking is, if the truth is that viruses do not cause disease, which do they exist? But there's two arguments there. There's, do they exist, and then do they cause disease? The whole terrain, we haven't even spoken about the whole terrain thing, but there's that whole thing. So if the arguments of someone like Fullmich wins over time, like in the popular court of opinions, then what happens when there's the next pandemic, right? Because now viruses still cause disease, but it was just a problem with SARS-CoV-2. But in the future, like if there's a more, like, let's say it's more obvious that people are sicker or dying, then if this point has not been cleared out properly, then we get into the same boat again altogether, and people are still going to be in the same germ theory mindset of being afraid of a little bug that can drop on you at any time. So if I could just, one important point, and I have pointed this out to Reiner and to others on that. Yeah, can you just, before you make the point, can you tell me precisely how much time you have? Because I'm fine. I can go another 15 minutes if need be. Okay, because I want to take like at least 5 or 10 minutes to give you like my little perspective at the end there.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So one thing I try to stress in my interviews, and I have said this repeatedly with that Doctors for COVID ethic, there's people like Dolores Cahill, you know, Reiner Fullmich, the very famous people on that list. And what I keep pointing out is all this fraud did not just begin with COVID, you know, because like I said, we have the Freedom of Information responses on all these other alleged viruses too. And if the CDC and Public Health Agency of Canada don't have any record of them having been purified, I think we can be pretty confident that they haven't been purified, especially when they're telling us what you're asking for is never done in virology. So I point out to them, listen, the manipulation, the fraud, the carnage did not just begin with COVID. It was amplified with COVID, but we've had people being coerced into getting their children injected for decades to go to school. Some adults, to go to their workplace, they're told they have to have certain injections or to travel. And you think even things that have been done in the name of virology, like the horrifically toxic treatments given to the AIDS patients, that ATZ drug, or people even been put in jail because supposedly they exposed somebody else to HIV. You know, like a lot of horrors have been going on for decades in the name of virology. So if that's all false, and like you said, so they're just going to let that continue. They're going to let children keep getting injected year after year for all these imaginary viruses. And like you said, leave us set up for the next fake pandemic. You know, that makes no sense whatsoever to me. And to me, that's just simple logic. You know, why would you not want to take down the entire structure if you're in a position to do that?
Rip out the whole band-aid, right? And not
Yes.
just like protect people by trying to, I mean, it's going to take 10 years to remove the band-aid if you do that. And 10 years later, you're like, well, it's already healed under. We just had to remove it like faster,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. And sorry, especially when Dr. Stefan Lanka already won a case in Germany. He won in court. It's recognized under German law.
When I speak to that to people here in Quebec about that, like people are like, he didn't win because like they showed like because there was 2 different court levels, right? And the first one kind of refused his argument, but then he won at the higher courts, but it's not been reported nowhere.
Yes, I think Dr. Sam Bailey did a video on that.
Yeah,
but I mean, that helps to
in the media, like in the general.
Oh, for sure. But you know, Reiner as a lawyer, especially when operating in Germany, he should be like very eager to find out more about that and to follow through on that and say, look, we already have a win in Germany on the books. So I find it very strange that he doesn't plan to pursue that.
It is
for whatever reason. So
that's an interesting place when as a human being you have to be like, oh, where do I stand like emotionally about that? And just like because the tendency to accuse and to ascribe intentions, because like there's a possible world in where it could be really like sincere and say this is the logical best way to go about it, like and maybe he doesn't understand at all. Because like he was kind of on the committee, he was kind of a bit more on the side, and Wolfgang was more speaking, and the lady as well. And she got quite aggressive with Stefan Lanka, which that's another thing I didn't understand. She was like, let's not use that type of language. And I was like, what language? He's just being scientifically rigorous. Anyways, that's a whole other thing. All right. So thank you so much, Christine. This is amazing. Did you have any other stuff?
No, I think that's good. I think we covered a lot.
All right.
And hopefully this will be helpful to the people there in Quebec and the French.
Definitely. I mean, it will definitely be helpful. It will bring your information, which is crucial to the public, to understand the problems in the science, the transparency as well of what they're doing. And as you said, the proper mechanics of what is supposed to be a virus isolation, which then they're claiming to have isolated the particle, which is totally not true. Right. So we totally agree on that. And we'll see. I mean, I just want to say that I hope you are not going to give up. You're going to continue working on that. And hopefully you and all the guys and girls there that are kind of getting together around the people such as yourself who are bringing out important facts to the world. I hope that you're going to create like more momentum, and that you're just going to be able to help us all evolve as a humanity and get into a better place, because I think ultimately that's what we're trying to do. So my final words to you, Christine Massey, would be just a huge thank you for the bottom of my heart. And again, I just want to send you as much energy as possible so that you stay strong and healthy and keep fighting for all of us. And as well, just in case someone in your team listens to this, thank you as well for helping Christine do the important work she's doing. And I just want to leave you maybe a final word, if you have any final thoughts that you want to say. And mention, of course, your website, which is riderepeal.com. Is it com or C?
Yeah, maybe I'll just really quickly share my screen if that's okay.
Of course.
I think you need to enable it. I don't know if that will take too long. It says disabled, but it's fluoride-free-peel.ca.
Go ahead. I think
okay, thank you. Let me try. I always forget how to do this. Hopefully, is that do you see my website?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so just be sure if someone's typing it in to spell it FLUO, because people often spell it OU by mistake. And it's free, and Peel, that's just the name of the community that I used to live in, and it's .ca for Canada.
Awesome.
And then if you click here, you'll find the FOI responses.
Amazing.
So I'll just stop that. Okay, so
that's perfect. So if people want to see the documentation, the paper, like the straight up facts that you were able to gather, they can just go there into that little section of the website. And do you communicate with people directly, or what else can people do if they want to support you? Maybe do you?
Well, my email is on the website, and I think there's a link to my Facebook account is there too. So yeah, if anybody needs to get in touch with me, or if they want to submit their own FOI requests, like I said, there's a template on the website, so they can do that. And I would just like to tell everybody that this, what we've been talking about is not a complicated issue. It's not hard for people to understand. So don't be intimidated, because often you'll have people telling you, who are you to question? You don't have the qualifications or whatever, but it's actually not a complicated issue. So. And amazing. That's it. I guess stay strong, and God bless everybody, and take care. And I don't know, we're going to get through this somehow. So
I'm pretty sure that we will. I mean, there's still a bit of rough times ahead, but over the edge, I think we'll be into a much better place. Everyone, thanks to people like you.
Yes.
So thanks again. And I think it's very important. The last thing that you said, trust yourself, people. We're all scientists. I guess when we're born, we like to ask questions. So just keep asking questions, trust yourself, and do your best with all the materials. So thank you again, Christine Massey. I wish you all the best, and hope to see you again in different platforms in the future. Have a great day, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That's it. C'était le podcast dans le Franc des yeux, 15e épisode et avant-dernier de la série À qui la science de cette première saison. Voilà, qu'en pensez-vous? Ça fait-tu du sens? Ça a-tu pas de bon sens? Trouvez-vous que j'ai assez posé des questions intéressantes? Je ne sais pas. Laissez-moi partager, laissez-moi connaître vos opinions. Partagez-moi ça dans les commentaires. Si ça vous intéresse, peut-être, c'est rare que j'appelle aux commentaires, mais étant donné que, comme je disais au début dans l'intro, personne ne parle de ça ici pratiquement, probablement que c'est parce que j'ai tort de m'intéresser à ça. C'est ce que je me dis toujours. C'est la chose la plus logique, la plus réaliste. Hein? Étant donné que c'est tellement en marge, probablement que ça ne vaut pas la peine de passer autant de temps que ça là-dessus. Mais d'un autre côté, il y a tellement de choses qui se passent partout au monde présentement et tout ça que quand on pense à l'idée de se dire ce qui se passe présentement est plus gros que ce qu'on pourrait imaginer, je trouve ça intéressant. Alors bref, le futur nous dira qu'est-ce qu'il en est de la situation virale et au niveau de qu'est-ce qu'on pense aussi avec la contagion, parce que ça va tout en arrière de ça également. Alors voilà, c'était le show tout le monde. Merci, j'espère que ça vous a permis de voir encore une fois la pandémie avec les yeux d'une nouvelle personne, celle de Christine Massey, ici au Canada, qui fait un travail vraiment incroyable pour avoir ramassé tout ça. Puis ça continue, ça fait un mois que l'épisode avait été enregistré aujourd'hui, mais moi je continue, je suis sur sa mailing list et tout là, puis les preuves continuent de s'accumuler et tout. Il y a de plus en plus de gens qui se ramassent autour de ça et Je voulais juste vous laisser avec une idée intéressante parce que là, on est aujourd'hui le 13 avril et il y a 2 jours, pour ceux qui suivent tout ce qui se passe avec toute la question de la pandémie, eh bien, il y a toute l'histoire qui a explosé à propos de quoi? La question du venin. Potentiel. Avez-vous entendu parler de ça? Dr. Hardis, etc. Alors là, ça vient de sortir. Donc, c'est tout chaud. Là, tout le monde s'est tiré les cheveux autour de ça ici. Mais on va voir comment ça va se développer parce qu'il manque vraiment de preuves et d'évidences pour que toute la théorie du Dr. Hardis avec mettre ça dans les sources d'eau là, des villes et tout ça, là, ça devient difficile à prouver. Il n'y a comme pas de fait vraiment pour le valider. Mais d'un autre côté, il y a quelque chose de vraiment intéressant avec ça parce que ça gagne à lui. C'est quelqu'un qui ont toujours dit aux gens comme Christine Massey que leur idée que les virus n'étaient jamais purifiés, isolés, caractérisés, ça ne faisait pas de sens, c'était pas vrai. Par contre, ça gagne à lui. Autour de lui, il y a des gens qui trouvent ça intéressant, sa théorie de toute l'histoire du venin et tout ça. Alors, si cette gang-là se rallie autour de ça, ben là, ils vont être obligés de se dire « Ah, mais finalement, c'était quoi donc les virus? Et est-ce que cette gang-là pourrait s'allier avec la gang ici de Massey, Lanka, Kaufman, Cowan, Bailey, etc.? » C'est juste une suggestion à brûle pour point comme ça à cause de l'actualité des 2 derniers jours sur toute la question de la pandémie. Mais on verra bien où tout ça se passe. Mais de toute façon, comme vous le savez, YouTube, je te parle encore une fois, moi j'admets bien sûr que la réalité, le consensus social de la santé publique et de nos institutions gouvernementales et scientifiques et médiatiques est sans doute le vrai parce que c'est ça qui est admis publiquement pour tout le monde. Donc, j'imagine que c'est la réalité. Mais bien sûr, on peut se poser des questions et c'est tout ce qu'on a essayé de faire ici aujourd'hui. Alors voilà, si vous avez apprécié tout le monde, le podcast dans le franc des yeux, il y a des options pour les contributions dans les commentaires, dans la description du vidéo également. Alors, virement Interact si vous le désirez. Donation Gabe Masson, tout en un mot, @gmail.com avec le mot de passe franc, FRANC en minuscule. Et sinon, paypal.me/Gabe Masson et Gabe Masson, GABEMA2SON. Voilà tout le monde. Je vous invite encore une fois à continuer à vous questionner, essayer de faire ça avec franchise envers vous-même et envers les gens avec qui vous intéressez. Je pense que c'est la meilleure façon d'avancer dans la vie et de propager l'amour partout autour de soi. Et that's it tout le monde. On se revoit dans le prochain épisode. Merci d'avoir été là. Ciao!